Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a great summer. It's finally time for football season again. I'm Sam Battaglia, your host of the Fantasy Funday podcast, and let's get after it. So this week is the first week of NFL. Everybody's been looking all summer to try to figure out who the best players to take are. Well, I've got a top 5 list for you in some categories that you might find useful. Top 5 bounce-back players this year. Number 1, Saquon Barkley. This guy is so talented and has been so underdrafted this year in those fears of his injury that he's about a year off of now. So we'll see how he comes back, but I expect a strong season from him. A.J. Green, new team, out in Arizona. Some are saying out there that he looks like the A.J. Green from a few years ago. It looks like he's got some pep in his step, and Kyler Murray is certainly going to be a good quarterback throwing him the ball. Joe Burrow, big rookie last year. It's his time to shine this year. He has been injured at the part of the year last year, and then now's his opportunity to come back and prove his first-round pick. Tyrell Williams, new team, Detroit Lions. He is their number 1 wide receiver. He sat out last year. He's on nobody's radar. That's the guy that's going to bounce back in a big way as a wide receiver 1. Dak Prescott, we all saw him play the other night. He looks good. He is bouncing back. He's going to have a big year. Moving on, the top 5 busts now based on average draft position. Antonio Gibson, I like him, but I think he's getting drafted too high. I'm not going to call him a complete bust. He's just a bust for where he's being drafted, in my opinion. Another running back, Jonathan Taylor. Very talented, just like Gibson as well. His only problem is he's got a running back behind him that just got an $18 million contract for a few years, so he's not going to get all the touches. Could be a 60-40 time split between Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, and that is not going to justify Jonathan Taylor's first-round draft pick average. Keenan Allen, I've been saying this for a few years now. I think this might be the year that he slows down. We'll see how things shake out with his team. He's got a very talented quarterback, but there is some talent around him that might have to get the ball this year, as he might be crescending on the downslope of his career now, but he's wonderful, and we'll see. Robert Woods. I think this guy is a good player. I just think he's been overrated. When he came to LA after he left Buffalo, he wasn't that highly valued, but now he's got a lot of value. I just think his value is not as high as everyone's drafting him. And then Jerry Jeudy. This guy has 2 other wide receivers around him, Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick. I can't tell the difference between the 3 of them, but everybody's been rushing and falling over themselves, in my opinion, to overdraft Jerry Jeudy. Here we are, the top 5 running back handcuffs that do indeed have standalone value. And regardless if the player in front of them gets hurt or sits out for some reason, they'll get you points every week. The first one is Karim Hunt. Karim Hunt used to be the number 1 fantasy player in Kansas City a few years back. He's now signed down with Cleveland for the last few years, and he's sitting in a backfield with a very, very talented Nick Chubb. But Karim Hunt is somebody you can get value on and draft late that will have standalone value, who is considered technically a handcuff. Melvin Gordon, very talented player, was a first-round pick the last few years ago, but now he's fallen to the wayside. He will be somebody that will have standalone value outside of Williams, who should be the primary ball carrier, the new rookie in Denver now. Darrell Williams over on Kansas City, very, very talented running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, of course, the number 1, but Darrell Williams can stand on his own and can get you points on a weekly basis. I expect a 65-35 split between Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams for the Chiefs this year. Sony Michel, newly minted onto the Rams after they had that big injury earlier with Cam Akers. Sony Michel is going to have standalone value, and I'm not even sure I can say that he's not going to be the number 1 running back there ahead of Darrell Henderson, but most likely to start things, maybe a 55-45 timeshare in whichever direction you choose. And then Nyheim Hines. I mentioned him earlier when discussing Jonathan Taylor. He is certainly a handcuff, but he does a lot, and especially in point per reception leagues, and he just got a big contract. They didn't pay him all that money to not get at the ball in his hands. Moving on to the top 5 team running games to draft. Usually, people don't want to draft 2 players from the same team, especially at the same position, but in this modern NFL where there's so few one ball carrier on a team, one primary ball carrier on a team, it's not a bad idea, especially if you can get value, to draft two people from the same team as running backs. My first top 5 running teams to draft, if you can get them, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams over at Kansas City, as we just discussed. My second one to go after would be Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake of the Las Vegas Raiders. Both very talented. Both could be number ones, but they are in a timeshare. If one of them goes down, the other one's going to vault in their value. Baltimore's running game. Now, this is new. I'm doing this on Saturday, the Saturday before the NFL season, which is tomorrow. I did have, prior to this, Gus Edwards and Tyson Williams. I've had to change Gus Edwards around to now Latavius Murray and Tyson Williams. I love Tyson Williams all preseason. I also am a big fan of Latavius Murray for the last few years. Unfortunately, that Baltimore backfield especially is snake-bitten, and now they've had to sign Latavius, who got out of a contract, let go actually last week from the Saints. Very talented runner, very talented pass catcher, and according to the coach over there in Baltimore, fits right into what they're doing. So it's Latavius Murray and Tyson Williams. Moving on, the Arizona backfield, two very talented runners again that could both be number ones on their own, but they're not. Edmonds is slated as the number one, Chase Edmonds, but James Conner is indeed going to be carrying the ball. I would imagine a 60-40 split. Again, with either one of them going down for any reason, God forbid, the other one would move right up the charts. And last but not least, probably the most vicious running game in the NFL on a team basis, the San Francisco 49ers. Raheem Mostert, who is tried and true. If he gets in the open field, no one's catching up with him. And then Trey Sermon, a new guy. We're going to see how this shakes out, but I do expect Mostert to handle, at least initially, the majority of the carries for the San Francisco 49ers. But if you can draft both Mostert and Sermon, I would say go ahead and get them because they'll both come at a value to you. Moving on to the 5 underdrafted players that should be drafted higher. Mentioned a couple of these people already. Saquon Barkley, don't need to say more. I saw him go in the last pick of the second round in a 12-man league the other night with players who actually know what they're doing. So everyone's scared off. He is being way underdrafted. If he was healthy, he would be a top 7 pick, let's say. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, same thing. The injury tag just came off of him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on one of the most highly powerful, if not the most potent offenses in the league in Kansas City, and he is certainly being underdrafted. I see him and these Kansas City running backs historically, the Larry Johnsons, the Priest Holmes. If you've got a Kansas City running back you can get a hold of and take him at a value, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I've also seen him go as late as the third round, middle third round for that matter, in 12-man drafts, again, with people that know what they're doing. So he's definitely going underdrafted. Karim Hunt, discussed him already. Don't like to repeat people, but he's certainly getting underdrafted. He's going average in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round I've seen him. If, God forbid, something happens to Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt steps in. If you've got a decent team, you have a very good chance of winning your league with Kareem Hunt on your team. Julio Jones, I think he is being severely underdrafted. I'm not even sure that A.J. Brown is better than him and is even the true number 1 wide receiver on Julio's new team, the Tennessee Titans. But Julio is indeed, as we all know, for the last decade, extremely talented and just a tough cover for any secondary. And I think he's being way underdrafted. You could even, in some cases, justify drafting him ahead of A.J. Brown there. And then last but not least in this section, Jarvis Landry, especially in a PPR league. This gentleman is going way underdrafted. He knows how to get into the middle of the field, turn around, and sit down on a ball. I think Jarvis Landry is good for 110 catches this year. Moving on to what I believe is one of the most important things in game. When you have a starting quarterback and you have their number 1 or close number 2, 1A, 1B wide receiver, you can call that a double up. Now, we obviously all know that if your quarterback throws a touchdown to your wide receiver, you're probably going to get 20 points or so, depending on your league scoring and PPR and bonuses, and depending on how big it is. But if you can get a nice double up, you can really do some damage to your opponent on Sundays, and Monday nights too, for that matter, and Thursdays. But, we all know who the obvious Mahomes, Josh Allen's, who their receivers are. But I'm going to take a look at some people that you can certainly get a value here. Daniel Jones, if everybody remembers, when he started playing, he came shot out of a cannon, this guy. And I think he's very talented, and he has a really good number one wide receiver, Kenny Golladay, who came over from the Detroit Lions. He's a little bit banged up, but I think he'll get his feet underneath him in the next couple weeks. Daniel Jones, Kenny Golladay, nice low-key double up. Ben Roethlisberger is being drafted way too low. I'll get to that. But Ben Roethlisberger and any three of his wide receivers you take out of Claypool, Smith-Schuster, or Johnson, you can get a nice double up and a nice value if you just take the third guy off your board in those wide receivers. If you have Ben Roethlisberger, who I've seen going 3 or 4 rounds from the last round. That's way too low for somebody who can throw the ball like him. Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is not a cheap wide receiver, but Matt Ryan is a cheap quarterback who is highly rostered, but not rostered enough, I don't think, considering what he has the ability to do with Kyle Pitts now and Calvin Ridley and Mike Davis, that stud running back behind him. So I do actually believe that we will see Matt Ryan have a successful year throwing the ball to Calvin Ridley. One of my favorite players headed into this year, Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp. You can get them at a value. Cooper, you'll probably have to go, depending on how aggressive your league is, probably 4th or 5th round as a wide receiver, and then maybe 4 or 5 rounds after that. But you can get that double up for not that much, so to speak, in terms of where you're drafting them. And then I've got Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. I think everybody's been sleeping on Marquise Brown. He had an injury tag next to him, so people shied away from him in drafts. I actually expect really big things out of Lamar Jackson this year. Of course, he has that big stud, Mark Andrews, to throw at tight end. But Marquise Brown is faster than light, and he will get down the field, and Lamar will get him the ball. I expect big things out of that connection this year. Moving on to our top 5 sleepers. Mentioned this guy. He's a stud, Mike Davis. I believe he was actually 5th last year in running backs catching passes. Mike Davis, big sleeper. I've been taking him as early as the first pick in the 3rd round just because I don't want anyone to crush me and take him before it came back to me. So I reached all summer on Mike Davis. I expect big things out of him this year. Michael Pittman over on Indianapolis. He is also very fast, can catch the ball, runs in traffic, isn't scared to go across the middle, and it will be because T.Y. Hilton is injured and probably should have been anyways just as things go. T.Y. took over for his guy. This guy might take over for T.Y. here. Michael Pittman, expect big things out of him this year. Number 1 wide receiver, Indianapolis Colts. Touching on Marquise Brown again, I've said my piece. Marquise Brown, big sleeper this year. Talked about Matt Stafford already. Big sleeper this year, Matt Stafford. I could step out on a ledge and say Matt Stafford could be in the running for NFL actual MVP of the league this year. His Rams are expected to go places. He's going to have a much easier time at it in Los Angeles than he would in Detroit with the Lions over there to really put the icing on his career. Statistically, he's unbelievable. He's just got to win some playoff games, and I think this is going to be Matt Stafford's time. And then Rob Gronkowski. I know this seems easy for me to say right now. All my leagues, I have Gronk. Gronk didn't come back this year, get paid $10 million to go on a year-to-year contract, play with Brady again, just won a Super Bowl. He didn't come back to not catch touchdowns and catch balls and be there as the outlet for Brady, as we saw the other night on Thursday Night Football. So big sleeper, Gronkowski. Cat's out of the bag now. But if you got him later, or I was getting him 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th rounds sometimes, congratulations. Moving on, the most exciting part of fantasy, I think, is the rookies. As we go here, I really like Ramondre Stevenson over on the New England Patriots. Unbelievable preseason, really fast. Patriots, we're going to see what they look like this year. They've got Mac Jones under center. Mac Jones, he will be a good quarterback, but as we all know, even Peyton Manning his rookie year, I think, threw double the amount of interceptions or even more than he did touchdowns. He is going to have, a tough time coming out of the gate, so they're going to have to lean big time on that running game in New England. Ramondre Stevenson is going to get the majority of the carries, in my estimation, by the 10th week of the year. We'll see how this shakes. Tyson Williams, talked about him already. Super stud. If you got him in your draft before Gus Edwards went down the other night, congratulations. If you've got a decent team, he's going to give you a real shot to win your league. A guy over in Pittsburgh, I love those Pittsburgh tight ends, Pat Freiermuth. If you saw him in the preseason, I don't know who can cover him. They, of course, have Eric Ebron over there, but I think Freiermuth in the next year, by the end of this year, beginning of next year, will be indeed considered a top 10 tight end in the league. Terrace Marshall Jr., interesting play here in Carolina. Been moving up draft boards as of late. They need a big guy to catch the ball over there. He's a big guy that can catch the ball. Rondale Moore out in Arizona. Of course, he's got Hopkins and Green and Christian Kirk. But Rondale Moore, they drafted him for a reason. They're going to use him. He's going to be a nice play, especially if one of the big wide receivers out in Arizona takes some time off this year. Moving on to value when it comes to these quarterbacks. Number one, I already talked about Matt Stafford. You know my feelings on him. Potential real-life MVP candidate. Ryan Tannehill, very talented, in my opinion, very underrated over there in Tennessee. He's got Derrick Henry protecting him there. He's going to give a lot of those wide receivers and tight ends a lot of one-on-one coverage because they've got to put so many people in the box to try to stop Derrick Henry. So Ryan Tannehill is going to be a good value to you this year. Matt Ryan, back onto him. Again, he's highly owned, but I've seen him go undrafted in leagues where other people have been drafted before him. I think he's going to come at a great value this year. I'm looking at Baker Mayfield for my next pick here for quarterback values. Baker Mayfield has all the talent in the world. He's got all the talent in the world surrounding him. 2 stud running backs, 2+ stud wide receivers in Landry and Odell Beckham. Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to start doing some things this year, it sounds like. So Baker Mayfield is going to be coming at a value to you in your fantasy draft, and maybe even off waivers for that matter in some leagues. And then Kirk Cousins, got a stud Dalvin Cook in the backfield with him. He's going to have to keep people in the box. He's got great receivers on the outside, Jefferson and Thielen. And I even like that Chris Herndon that they signed from the Jets. They traded for him, I believe, Minnesota, once Irv Smith got hurt. So I think that Kirk Cousins has a lot of weapons around him, and he is not shy to throw the ball, as we know. All right. We are down to the last category for the top 5 show for the Fantasy Funday podcast. These are going to be the top 5 fantasy players this year, in my opinion, based on individual position and their average draft position. Number 1, Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders last year was going in the first round of drafts. 2 years ago, nobody could see anything but the back of his jersey, and if you squinted your eyes, you'd think it was a bolt of lightning running by you. When it said Sanders, it could have tricked some people. Miles Sanders is coming cheap. He's going to be a stud this year, and he's being drafted way too low. DK Metcalf, I know he's a top 5 wide receiver. I actually have him as my number 1 wide receiver, but I've seen 5, 6 wide receivers get drafted before him. I don't think any wide receiver should be drafted before DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, based on his ADP and his position, is my top wide receiver. Kyle Pitts, big-time rookie over in Atlanta, taking over for Julio Jones. Some view him as a tight end. Some view him as a wide receiver. Hopefully you've got a league where you can flex in a tight end, and you've got another tight end. You've just got a downright stud here. He's coming off the board, 2nd, 3rd, 4th tight end right now, or did come off the board because fantasy draft season's almost over. But Kyle Pitts, in my opinion, should have been the number 1 tight end ahead of all the big names, as he is essentially going to work as that big target in the red zone, replacing Julio. And if you saw the preseason game a few weeks ago, they were making some comparisons to Kyle Pitts and Calvin Johnson. I need say no more. Antonio Brown and Tom Brady. This is Saturday. Their game was 2 days ago. I have them pretty much in every single league. Tom Brady, up until drafts after Thursday night, was probably the 10th to 12th quarterback taken. I got him as late as the 10th, 12th round. That's a huge value. He's the best player in the history of the NFL. So he is still at that level somehow. Takes good care of himself. He is coming at a huge value this year. And Antonio Brown, have him in basically every league. Again, easy call. Game was Thursday. But he is going to be a stud, and he's going to way outplay his draft position. And in my opinion, he is the number one wide receiver on Tampa Bay ahead of the rest. And, of course, he's got Gronk. I hope you enjoyed the show. This is the Fantasy Funday podcast. Please watch for our weekly shows to set your lineup, waiver wires, and then when basketball season comes, we're going to enjoy that also. Have a great weekend, everybody, and enjoy the NFL.